So good afternoon, everybody. We're going to start. My name is Miriam. I'm a social worker at Sick Kids, and I'm here to spend the next 30 minutes talking with you about bullying, including some practical things that you can do to help your child. I'm very much a fidgeter and a wanderer, so if I start wandering away from the microphone, I've asked some specific people in the back to please wave to me. Thank you. Don't give me a little wave. I won't notice. Give me a huge wave, and then I will migrate back to the microphone, all right? We won't have time for questions, but feel free to contact me at Sick Kids if you have any questions and follow up. All right, so we're going to spend the first bit talking about bullying. I'm going to share some information about bullying, but the majority of our time will be spent talking about things that you can do to help your child. So first of all, what is bullying? A lot of different definitions are out there, but there are 4 things that are always included now in the definition of bullying. So one is that the behavior is mean or hurtful. The second is that it's purposeful. The third is that it's aimed at someone who has a hard time defending themselves. And the fourth is that the behavior is repeated. There's usually a pattern. How common is bullying? Not very scientific of me to put the word very, but the numbers really range depending on who you ask, what type of bullying you're looking at, over what period of time. Lots of different things affect the numbers, but all of the research says it absolutely exists, and it is very, very rare to meet an adult who does not remember being bullied as a child. Very rare. I would say exceptional. I have a 15% up on the screen. Sorry. 15% is how often we hear about bullying. So children only report to adults about 15% of the time, 15% of the incidents. That is a frighteningly low number. But what we know about this number is that when a child comes and tells us that there's a problem, we need to pay attention and do something about it. The last question on the screen is, how about children with special needs? The vast majority of research tells us that children with special needs are more at risk of being bullied. They're also more at risk of being chronically bullied. So, why are children bullied? Multiple reasons, any reason out there. But the research tells us that around the globe, the same issues come up over and over, and in this order. Number 1 is race. Number 2 is religion. The third is gender, and some research ties in gender and sexual orientation. The 4th is physical ability, and the 5th is cognitive functioning. So what are some risk factors and protective factors that might make children more vulnerable to being bullied or less vulnerable to being bullied? The first is behavior. Children with neurodevelopmental disorders often present with behaviors that are unusual compared to your average child, right? So this can make your child more of a target. Impulsivity, I like this cartoon. She's saying, I've just got to buy this. And the book is called How to Stop Impulse Buying, right? So anyone who's a parent of a child with ADHD, right, impulsivity is a huge problem, and kids who are impulsive tend to get themselves into stickier situations more often than kids who aren't impulsive. There's lots of writing in the first, don't even worry about it, that's a scale. It's an assessment of global function, a global assessment of functioning. So there's lots of research about kids being bullied, what populations are more at risk of being bullied. And, sorry, one perhaps surprising fact to some people is that the closer a child is in terms of their overall functioning to average, the more at risk they are of being bullied. So what would that mean for kids that we know? That would mean that a child who has Asperger's is actually more at risk of being bullied than a child with severe autism. So that might be a little bit of a surprise. It may not be. I put a picture of a school up here because schools can be a very protective factor or a risk factor for your child, depending on a lot of things. So schools are where bullying happens the most. And this makes sense because this is where kids spend most of their awake hours. This is also where children are with other children the most. So the more opportunities you have for interaction, the more opportunities you have for good interaction and for bad interaction. So in general, research in bullying tells us that children who go to smaller schools experience less bullying. Children who are in smaller classrooms experience less bullying in the classroom. And if you take 2 schools that are the same size, and one school is kindergarten to grade 8, and the other school is all grades 7 and 8, the rates of bullying are going to be very different. There's going to be a lot more bullying in the 7 and 8 versus in the school where there's a wide range of ages. So mental illness, mental health diagnoses are also a risk factor for children in terms of their vulnerability to being bullied. Specifically, anxiety and depression. Children who have anxiety and or depression are more at risk of being bullied. And this can start a really vicious cycle. So a child is depressed, they're more likely to be bullied. Because they're being bullied, they're more likely to get more depressed, and this vicious cycle can start. Did I warn you I was going to depress you right after such a great lunch? I will turn it around, I promise. The other cycle to be aware of is that children who experience bullying often respond in the short term by removing themselves, by isolating themselves. It makes sense, right? You pull yourself away from other kids because you've just kind of been hurt by some kids, so you don't want to take that chance and be around other children. In the short term, that lowers that child's chance of being bullied, but in the long term, it actually does the opposite. If a child is avoiding being around other children, if they're isolating themselves, they're not going to have as many opportunities to develop, to practice and develop their social skills. They're not going to have as many opportunities to make friends and develop relationships and maybe make some allies to help them when situations happen, right? So in the short term for kids, it can feel like the safe thing to do, but in the long term, it actually works against them, and then the spiral can continue. Bullied, isolate yourself, makes you more of a potential target. You're bullied more, you isolate yourself more. So here's one of the many big questions. Why do children bully other children? Why do adults bully other adults? So there's a lot of research on this topic, and what I've read seems to fall into 3 different categories, and they sort of overlap in some ways. So the first is, I call it the animal kingdom category, because I could call it what I'd like. And it's really about when animals live in groups, that group has to have a clear leader, right? That group needs to know who can they follow, who's going to protect them. And in any group of animals, how does that lead identify themselves? Usually through aggression and assertion, right? So the idea is that, well, humans, we're pack animals, right? We live in groups. So maybe when you have a bunch of people together and they're all sort of similar in age, like I was saying about that school, grade 7s and 8s, there's something in our dynamic as a group that we need to sort of figure this out and say, okay, who's going to be the alpha in this group? So that's one theory. The next theory, shown with the egg, is the idea that it's actually an individual flaw with that person, and it's about that person's individual flaws. So as an adult, I am well aware I'm not a perfect person. There are things about myself that I'm proud of. There are things about myself that I'm absolutely not proud of and that don't make me feel good. But as an adult, I'm okay with that. I can manage that. I can handle those feelings. But as a child, I don't want to think about that. I don't want to think about the things about myself that make me feel bad. So the idea is that when I'm a child, if I see another child who's different in some way, or who's different in a way that reminds me at some level of my weaknesses or my flaws, I don't want to go there. So I push that person away. And that push might take the form of social isolation, like rejection. It might be physical bullying. It might be verbal bullying, right? So the first category is really about the group. The second idea, the second theory is more about the individual. And the third theory is that it's about power. And how does power feel? Power feels good. I work with kids who bully others. They tell me afterwards they felt bad, but in the moment, they felt good, right? And our society, we reward bullies, right? I'm not allowed to name names, but just imagine television celebrities like a chef who makes life hell for people who come in his kitchen, right? Right, so we all know who I'm talking about. I don't have to say a name. Multi-millionaire, many, many followers, right? So what are we doing as a society? We reward this kind of power, right? So I hope I haven't totally depressed you. I want to tell you I know people are looking at this slide going, what? I see lots of surprised faces, but I want to tell you some good news. So the first thing is this picture here. Research in children going through hardship, all different kinds of hardship, tell us over and over and over again, the one thing that makes the biggest difference to a child getting through is having one supportive adult. That's the minimum, and that makes a huge difference, right? You're all here because you want to learn and help your kids. You are the person for your child, right? The picture up on the right is a picture of scars. Not the best picture, but what I want to draw the point home that bullying hurts. It hurts all of us. And most of us have scars from when we were bullied when we were children. And we have scars from every hard experience that we've been through. And sometimes those scars show, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes they're very big scars that get in the way, and sometimes they're small scars. But most of us manage to go on and have a productive life and a relatively happy life, right? Most people can overcome. And while there are still scars, we can still go on and do well. The third is the t-shirt. It said boys will be boys, and then the boys is crossed off. Boys will be held accountable. Everybody will be held accountable. Attitudes about bullying have changed dramatically in the last 20 years. It used to be, this is the normal, this is just how things are, and now that is no longer acceptable. And in line with that attitude change, policies have changed, laws have changed, approaches have changed. So that's a really positive thing. All right, so of course what you're here for. What can you do when your child comes to you and tells you that they're being bullied? So the first is what not to do. So try really hard on the outside not to show that you're upset, right? Lots of kids don't want to talk to their parents because they don't want to upset their parents, so you got to fake calm. Secondly, don't tell your child to ignore it, walk away, or hit back. And I have asterisks there. Why would I say don't tell your child to ignore it? Absolutely tell your child to ignore it. But if that's the only thing you teach your child, that is not going to work. Children are not good enough actors to show on the outside that they're ignoring it, right? It's one of many strategies. The same for walking away. It is almost impossible for most kids to walk away from their bully. So those two pieces of advice can be given, but if you're going to teach one thing or two things, don't make it those one or two things. The last thing is hit back. I am not an advocate for children hitting other children when they hit you, hit them back. That is not a good idea, and the research tells us over and over that doesn't work, it's not effective, right? But I wouldn't say to a child, never hit anybody. Because if a child is in a corner and they have done everything they can and they're being beaten up and they've yelled and nobody comes, you do what you gotta do, right? So never say never. Don't call the parents of the bully. That can be easy, that can be hard. What if it's your good friend and your daughter just comes home and says her daughter hurt your daughter, kind of thing, right? So if you feel compelled, you have to call this parent, my advice would be wait 24 hours or even wait 48 hours. Wait until you're calmer. And then when you call, instead of saying, your daughter bothered my daughter, it's a finger point, right? That's not going to be well received. It's better to say, I'm concerned. I'm worried that our kids aren't playing together so well. Do you know anything about this? Can we work together to make things better between our kids? That's an open hand. That will be received much more positively. So if you have to call the parent of the bully, that's the way to go about it. And last but not least, don't threaten the bully unless you want to see what the inside of your local police station looks like. So we're going to go through some do's. So first of all, like I said before, stay as calm as you can on the outside. Let all that out later when your child's not around. Next is get information about what happened. So the first thing you want to know is, who did this to your child? What's the fastest way to end a discussion? Who did this to you, right? So what you want to do is start off with other things. Oh no, tell me what happened. Where was this? When was this? Who else was around? Has this happened before? By the time you get to this, your child will be in a role, then they will tell you who did it. You want to reassure your child. Sweetie, this is not your fault. Remember that Impulse cartoon? What if your kid has been poking someone because they just want to interact, and then that person turns around and hit them? Your child still never wanted to start a fight, right? So it's not their intention. So, honey, I know this is not what you wanted to have happened. That's reassurance. Talk with your child about how you can help. That's like worth 3 hours. I could stand here for 3 hours and talk about that. So I will just say, talk about that with your child. Ask them what their ideas are. Share your ideas. And come up with a plan that you're both okay with. Don't just run off behind your kid's back. And don't bulldoze your child into something without them being in the know and to some level agreeing with it. Share concerns with the school in writing. That's really important for a couple of reasons. First, when there's documentation, it's easier for schools to keep track of patterns. Secondly, the law says if a school is aware of a bullying situation, they have to take action. And then third, I would suggest you think about how you write that letter. So, dear principal, you were negligent. You guys let my child get beaten up. It's your fault. What are you going to do? Is not going to get you very far. But if you write to the principal the same way you said you talked to your sister-in-law or your friend, right? I'm concerned, my child reported this to me, and you list what you know, and you say, I'm sure there's more to it, but I'm wondering if we can talk about how we can work together to improve this situation. That kind of letter will be welcomed. Next, seek a solution, not retribution. It is easy for us as adults to fall into the groove of, how is this child going to be punished, this child who hurt my child? But most kids do not want punishment. They don't care about that. They just want the situation to stop. They want the bullying to stop. So that should be our focus too. And the last is to collaborate with the school and not to blame. Next list of do's is kind of bigger picture stuff. So we always want to encourage with our children their strengths and teach them positive self-talk. This is really about self-esteem. We want to help our kids practice general social skills. That's really easy for me to say and really hard to do. But we can bring in different modalities, right? There are children's books that talk through social situations with pictures, with words. We can talk about it. We can role play with children. We can involve other people. There are a lot of ways we can help kids start to pick up social skills. Talk about how to deal with conflict. Now, this is actually a really hard one because as adults, we are generally not that comfortable dealing with conflict ourselves, right? Most of us, when something not good is happening, we do our best to ignore it and we hope it will go away, right? And generally what we want is for everyone to address issues while they're small, while they're easily addressed, and while they can be resolved. But we tend to wait until things get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then when we try to jump in, it's that much harder to address. So we want to get better at dealing with conflict, and then we can help our kids get better at it as well. We want to encourage reporting. So remember I said that 15%? Why is that such a low number? Many, many reasons, but the key reason seems to be that kids, as they get older, they think that telling people about bullying is ratting. There's a big difference between ratting and reporting, or tattling and telling if you've got younger kids. Ratting is when you're telling somebody something because you want to get someone in trouble. That's the same as tattling. But telling or reporting is like calling 911. You're saying, there's a serious problem, I need help or someone needs help, and we need some help to make the situation better, to keep this person safe, right? So reporting is like a call to 911, and we want kids to understand that. Anticipate and practice. You know your child like no one else does, right? So you know what parts are hard for them. You can anticipate some of these things coming up and practice them as much as possible and involve others, because this is not something that one parent can do or two parents can do or three adults can do on their own. The more people we get involved with this, the better. And if you have a good relationship with your child's teacher and you say to the teacher, what are you doing in class to encourage these social skills or to encourage these relational skills? Can you take some of that home and do some of that at home? And if you're doing something at home and you're finding you think this might be helpful, share it with the teacher and maybe they can do that in the school as well. And my last slide, and I think I'm just on time, is the most important thing, and of course I left it to the end, but it is the most important. It's about taking care of yourself. So the cup says you can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first. People find different analogies work for them. Whatever reminds you to take care of yourself, that's what you should be doing. Some people say that they think about it like a battery. Most batteries, if you run them down to nothing, no matter how well you charge them, they don't go back to 100. Most batteries work better by topping them up as you go, right? Same as driving with a gas tank. If you're in fumes, how safe is your driving? How safe can that ride be, right? You want to top up that tank before it gets too low, right? So whatever analogy works for you, I would strongly encourage you just to think about that. And it's not like, oh, I'm going to plan a trip to the spa. Most people can't do that. So there might be the occasional big thing that helps you recharge, but it's making time every single day to take care of yourself. I think sometimes the best advice about the easiest things, I compare it to flossing your teeth. We all know we should floss our teeth, right? We all know we should. How long does it take? It's not a hard thing to do, but most of us leave it to the very end of the day, and at the end of the day we're like, too tired. At least this is me, right? And so then what happens? It's the same thing with self-care. It's not a hard thing if you make it a habit and you do it every day in a short period of time. Okay, so I think I'm just under the wire with time. What I'd like to do is go back to this slide and ask if anybody has an idea of something that they've done to help their child deal with bullying that they'd like to share with the bigger group. Can I see any hands if someone's got an idea? We have one right in the front.
My are supportive, and let's get us together and let's kind of conference on it. But that wasn't very practical, so they put together a letter and they emailed it to all the supportive people. And so this pouring of support came out. So that was a very positive thing because he actually came up with the ideas.
Fantastic. Can I just do a recap in case people can't hear just for part number 1? So her child suggested, what if we get all of the people who were supportive to meet together and then we can talk about it as a group? Wasn't really practical, but you communicated with everyone, and then the inpouring of love and support was fantastic, right? And what was the other idea that he came up with? You said there was a part 2.
Oh, no. I just meant of that, what I said, the part 1 was involving him in the solution.
Okay.
So that was empowering in itself. And then the second was implementing the action.
Great. So in case people in the back can't hear, it was because it was her son's idea, it was empowering to him, right? It was something he wanted to try and it worked well, and then it sounds like it was really positive. Someone else would like to share in the back. You're going to have to really holler.
I just want to know, what did you think about this idea that a parent told me? She said that her son was being bullied, and what he did was he went out and he bought a large amount of candy and came to the school and gave candy to all the bullies, and then the bullying stopped. What do you think about that as a solution?
I think that's a very creative, short-term, very temporary fix that could backfire very quickly, right? Because we have different types of bullies out there, and if I get candy as a reward for my nasty behavior, I might start to think, ooh, I want some candy, maybe I'm going to go back and be mean again, right? So I think it's well-intentioned, and I laud the creativity. I'm just not sure that the goal would be met in the long run. Yeah. We have 2 people, so how about if you go and then you go?
This is just a response to that comment, but it sounds to me like it could have raised his status in that community. So any way that I think that you can raise your child's status by doing something like a presentation to the group, or like my kid likes making paper planes, so he did a paper plane thing at a talent show, and all the kids loved it, and so that.
And I think if candies had been brought in for everybody, that's a more positive. That's more like we're all in the same group, we're all together, I'm helping everyone, we're all the same. But only giving candies to the kids who bully is really rewarding than nasty kids, right? Yeah. So paper plates, if there's one for everybody, then that's a really positive thing, right? So maybe that plan with a little bit of tweaking. Okay, we had another parent with a hand up. Right.
Treating her as a friend. She's very, very young and we're working years. So one of the things that we try to do is often talk about what a friend would do. Is that a nice thing for a friend to do? How would you treat other people? Not when she talks about this. Because she doesn't say to us, so-and-so was mean to us. She'll say, this happened. And we say, that doesn't sound like it was a very nice thing to do.
Right.
So we're really, for us, we're not quite there yet. We're trying to help her identify things that are unkind things because the other children are more mature than she is. So
For sure. So helping your child learn, helping your child learn what is a good friend and what isn't a good friend, but doing it in a way that's not every time that friend comes over that you're sort of attacking them after, right? For sure.
What is a nice friend? How
Right.
do we treat each other? How do we like to see other people?
And it's interesting in that a lot of kids, especially kids who are more at risk of being bullied, they gravitate towards the bully, right? So part of it is that bullies in general seem to be more popular, not the old-fashioned popular where people like them, but popular, the new popular, which is that you're well-known, right? And you have some kind of power. And I would rather be standing next to and be friends with the person who has the power than be on the outside and be a potential target, right? So I appreciate your rapt attention. Thank you. I think we're actually out of time, and I know the next person's coming up. So thank you very much.